Welcome, everyone. It is September 8th, 2024. We are delighted to have you back with us. And we have our panel tonight, Jim Porter, Karen Elkins, and John Bonzel. We're also hoping to have another guest as we're working through that issue right now. But before we begin, and we have a jam-packed conversation here tonight, but before we begin, we want to have us just tune in for a moment, get centered where we are, tune into the beautiful sunset that John Bonzel recorded for us. And we're going to pull up the ocean sounds, and I will do just a quick minute of recalibration and a guided meditation for us. So if you would, please close your eyes and simply tune in to the ocean sounds that are coming through now. If you would, just become centered down here into your heart. And as you're listening to the ocean sound, ask that you just focus and you begin to breathe in and out along with the ocean sound. Understanding that the ocean is representative of the universal heartbeat. As you center your breath, breathing deeply in and out, be reminded that you also have a moment of every day tuning into that universal heartbeat. You would center into your heart with gratitude, with love for yourself, for humanity, and for the journey that you're on. Join us this evening as we begin to take another adventure into the home study course. When you are ready, feel free to open your eyes. Now, I love that we have a variety of ocean sounds available on our 24/7 Awaken Genius channel there. And I wanted to do just a quick flashback right quick to Unit 1, because why do we start there with that first minute? Just takes a moment. Many people need longer to go into a deep meditation, but if you'll see here on the slides, others learn how to do it relatively quickly. And I wanted to remind us there, as we have this flashback here to Unit 1, that part of going back to that moment is this whole idea of decentration. Decentration, if we'll look at the next image. And so just wanted to remind everyone over there on page 63 of Unit 1, if you would please, just wanted to be sure that we're linking things as we go along. And I'm going to ask John right quick. John, can you give us the shortest description of what is that moment of decentration and how it ties into meditation?
Well, if you look at the drawing on screen, that was a drawing that Vince Lombardi did when the Green Bay Packers won the 1960 Super Bowl.
Is that what happened, John? Glad to know the Packers were so scientifically advanced, John.
All right. Decentration. Okay. The opposite of concentration. And had a conversation with my cousin Jim earlier today, and he defined both of those very well, that sequence. So beyond that sequence right there, so we'll just say to and from, or from and to. It's a sequence that never ends, but it's a simulation. It's not the idea, which we're going to talk about in lesson 14 here.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be my take on that.
All right, so just wanted to pause for a moment. And as we go in, I wanted to show you all where we are here in this September. So hard to believe we're already here at September, but if you'll take a look at this next one, here we are on September 8th, and we're at lesson 14. And so for everyone who is with us here tonight, I would encourage you. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Diane. Hello, Tony. So glad to have you all with us. I know that we have a lot more that will be joining us here. And just sit back and enjoy. And if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and place those in in the chat box. But before we begin tonight, I did want to start and answer a question that we had recently, and it was this: why do we do this? And so we wanted to take a moment, if you'll see there on the screen, why we do this. And I'm going to go through these next particular images relatively quickly because I wanted to recalibrate us all. You know, this next quote is one of my favorites from the Russell work, and it says, "Mediocrity is self-inflicted and genius is self-bestowed." And so when we came together for this particular project, what we wanted to do was, you can order lots of things at philosophy.org, but we wanted our efforts to be focused on two things. You'll see the next image that we wanted to focus on the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. So you can see where we actually focused that on one of our earliest, one of our very early broadcasts. But we wanted to keep the focus on that lovely, simple entree point. And we wanted to focus on the home study course. And so we have here both Jim and John of 50 years of experience here with the home study course. I'm a 3-year student. Karen has been studying the Russell work for quite some time, but this is her first time through the home study course. We're hoping to have one of our other long-term home study course students on as well. But I wanted to bring up two quotes for everyone just to recalibrate us. And this next one is very, very powerful. And it was actually part of why I fell in love with the work. John, would you mind reading that one?
Yes, I will. And I'll quote: "Since our teachings are based solely upon natural law, they are not in variance with any religious beliefs and are therefore universally acceptable. We have people from all races, nationalities, and creeds among our student body." Unquote.
I found that very, very powerful because it was one of the few places that I found where there wasn't trying to make one sound better or worse than the other. And then this next quote was another one. And Jim, if you would please read this next one, as it gives us kind of a snapshot of what the next 12 lessons look like.
"The next 12 lessons will be devoted to giving you a more intensive comprehension of the higher knowledge of God's invisible universe and your physical relation to it."
Need to fix that. You absolutely will. And if we'll go to the next one there, I love this particular quote. And Karen, this is a simple one here. And I know that John and Jim have said that Walter and Leo said this quite often. But if you'll share with everyone the simplicity of what's on the screen.
If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe.
There you go. And so what we're doing here is, even though we're in Unit 4, we don't want you to worry about being behind anyone. You have access to the videos all along, but we did want to show you a snapshot right quick. And so if you'll take a look at the next couple of screens, first of all, this next one, and James is going to bring this full screen. This is what we've covered so far. This is an outline of the first few units of the home study course. And you're going to see right there, here we are into Unit 4. Maybe you didn't recognize just how much we've covered. Look at everything there in Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, and as we go into Unit 4, and Unit 4 continues on the next page. And we're going to have this available to even download in the chat box just during this live time, and wanted to show you an outline here and one more page there. And John, as the former president of the University of Science and Philosophy, you actually suggested that we show this to everyone. And why did you feel that was important?
Well, the content of this home study course, I can't, the table of contents, I think is like, what, six pages. Maybe you're just showing them the first two
no,
units.
Those are the 6 pages. Yep.
Okay. And then what it does is it allows our audience to see not only what we're talking about, but what is to come. So whatever your field of endeavor is, whatever your expertise is, if it's human relations, if it's love, if it's counseling, if it's science, it's all there. And you'll know when we're going to bring it forth. So it's very important. I thought it was important for our audience to see that in advance.
I love that. I love that. And then we also, when you complete the home study course, you get a certificate of completion at the end of it. So we'll be talking about that. So all right, so let's see if we can have, because I want to introduce Margaret. I want to show Margaret Rue. Margaret, are you with us?
Can you hear me okay?
We can. You
All
are
right.
just in time.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. So I wanted to pull up these next few images here, and it's just a dose of inspiration for the week because we're going to highlight Margaret. It is a flashback from the past year and explain why we have them here. So when you take a look on the screen, just wanted to remind everybody that the three individuals that we have on the screen, Jim and Margaret and John, if you'll take a look there on slide 16, I know James is pulling that up. And a special thanks to Joey for helping us out there. So this is Walter and Leo Russell at Swannanoa. And so John and Jim worked at Swannanoa for 2 years while Leo was there. And Margaret, you were there for how long?
Yeah, a total of 11 years, 10 with Leo.
Okay, and so if you look at the next slide, you're going to see just a snapshot of when Leo was speaking to a lot of groups, but you're going to love this next image because not only do you get to see a close-up of Leo, but there is Margaret on the right, around 26 years old. Is that right, Margaret?
Yep.
26, she looks like she's 15 going on 16 is what I'm saying.
And so I'm going to ask James to just drop me and Karen off for just a moment. And I want to go to the three people that you see on the screen. And I want to, just for historical documentation, mention something to everybody. And I'm going to ask each one of them to comment on this. So when we see the three on the screen there, because what you're seeing is you have a treat here. There are very few people left in the world that have actually had the experience to live with Leo. And so I'm going to ask for me to be dropped off and Karen to be dropped off. And I'd like everyone to take a look because the three people that are on the screen in just a moment, as he's working on that. Okay, he says he can't drop me off and keep my audio. Okay, so in just a moment, when I'm going to be quiet, I'm going to ask the three of you to comment. And I want to just honor the fact that we have this kind of historical legacy, because I'd like John in just a moment to share just how many people are left that have ever lived with Leo. Jim, I'd like you to share just a little bit of insight about what you learned from Leo. And then Margaret, I'd like you to wrap it up with a final comment as Karen and I drop off the screen before we dive into lesson 14, because we have a big, big lesson ahead. John, if you would begin.
Well, as you see on the screen, the three of us, and then there was a gentleman named Sam Beiser that also spent time with Leo. And other than him, I'm not quite sure who else spent any great time there with Leo. Maybe Margaret could fill that in. But anyway, yeah, what a privilege it was. And you know, it influenced my life even to this day. It's like my morning routine now. I pretend as if I was still working at the palace, up at 5:30 outside, get my chores done, come in and have my first cup of coffee at 8 o'clock when the doors had to be open. So it's a wonder. There's just wonderful memories. And we worked our butts off 20 hours a day, nonstop, 7 days a week. So, but when you're working with love in your heart and you're working for the message, it's a wonderful thing.
And Jim?
My experience was also life-changing. It still is. I'm still learning from the wisdom of those two great teachers, Leo, who I knew, and Doctor, who I did not, through their works. And I agree that there were long days of loving service that John and I put in. But compared to Margaret and the other women in that palace, we were pikers. We'd be in bed at 10 or 11 o'clock so that we can get up early in the morning. And those girls would come down to their rooms at 3, 4 in the morning. Many, many times. Far more dedicated to the message than I knew how to be then. So give Margaret and the other women that were there at the time, Angela, and the few that I didn't meet directly, credit. Their dedication was endless and still is.
There is actually, I think, 3 other people that we could mention. John Philip Simpson. He's from Lexington, Kentucky. And I had a nice conversation with him 3 months back, and he worked for 10 months for Leo. And Leo had invited him back the following year, but he had gotten married and wasn't able to do that, but he would have loved to. And then Bridget and Kevin Love, they were also on staff at the time I was there. But for me, I think what it really helped me with is a sense of invincibility and confidence. I think when you know that God is mind and you can't destroy it, and so it gives you a sense of confidence and invincibility. And I did work hard, but I loved it because I was imbued with purpose. I had read their material. I was just a teenager, and I was introduced to it by my physics teacher in Canada. And it was after I read the Atomic Suicide book that I wanted to come down and just extend my help so that Leah could further her work. So that was really my motivation. And I was there for a total of 11 years. It was 1977 through 1989. I was with her when she refolded as well. So that was a huge void when that happened. So, all right. It's good to see you.
All right. Good to see you all. I know James is working on the dynamics behind the scenes. And Karen, I'm glad to have you with us as well. I just wanted to honor the three and just wondered if you had a comment of what you wanted to say to those three, because when you think about people who continued this legacy, it's more about the message than it is the individuals. But I know I have a deep, deep appreciation for everyone who has worked to keep these materials alive all these years so that I could be learning from them today.
I think I have a question for Margaret and these guys, because right now the book Atomic Suicide is very relevant to the topics of today, especially with the nuclear stuff that we have. So Margaret, what drew you? My question to you is, what drew you after reading as a very young person, Atomic Suicide? What would the message you have for the audience today, and what's pertinent of Walter Russell's work?
Yeah, in my day, so I was probably 17 at the time that I was first introduced. And, there was a lot of fear when I was a teenager of nuclear war, even back then. When the Russells wrote the book, nuclear testing was rampant. And because they give the true explanation of what radioactivity actually is, they explain in the book that man is trying to give the world nuclear energy by introducing the death principle. So, in other words, you can't really beget life by multiplying the death principle above Earth. She said that radioactivity belonged deep in the ground. It should not be dug up. And so the big mistake is that we brought it up above to expose all organic life to it. So when I read that, it made me feel, oh my gosh, the urgency. And then she stated in one of her lectures, Walter Russell feared that we let loose too much of it already. So I just felt that huge urgency.
Sure.
And so that's what gave me the impetus to try and help.
Well, and that's a powerful question. And for everyone who's watching us today, there's so much that we could talk about for all of Walter Russell's work. And as John continues to remind us all, the greatest contribution that any of us can make is actually in demonstrating the message by living it. So if it is okay with the panel, we're going to dive into lesson 14 here. If you all give me thumbs up that you're ready, so that we can go ahead and dive in. And I encourage all of you that have the home study course to please dive in. So we're going to bring up here on page 257. And this particular lesson is called The Higher Knowledge of Creation. And I wanted to start with that first highlighted quote there as we bring it up and make it a little bit larger here on the screen. And then I'm going to scoot us down to page 258. And so if you'll see there, as he's making it larger, be ye ever transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what they were referring to when they said what Paul really meant. But I want to scoot down to 258 because there's a big idea that we wanted to land. And it talks about, I'm going to ask John to comment first. Knowledge is mind idea unexpressed. Knowledge is expressed by the creation of bodies which simulate idea. So, and it goes on to say, knowledge resides in the creator, not in created bodies. And so if you would, John, if you'll begin, and then I'll ask Jim and Margaret to comment. Someone who is new to this language, what does this mean?
Well, let's keep it simple. Knowledge is self-explanatory, but mind is synonymous with God. So without God, there is nothing, but with God, there is everything. Okay, you have to remember that, and that's in its most simplest form. Okay, so idea. So idea exists in mind. But idea never leaves mind. It is only cast on the cinema screen. It's an illusion. It's a duality. But to our senses and to our brain, we think it's real, but it's not. But if you could just grasp that essence, that mind, okay. God, idea is all one.
All right. So, Jim, if you'll chime in, and then Margaret, before I keep us going, because we have 23 pages in this particular lesson with a lot of very, very big ideas. So, Jim, if you would, what do you want to add to that?
All there is light. That's what mind is. Joe, not Joe, I'm sorry. James, can you pull up that one that shows the division, the first chart of Dr. Russell's charts, scientific charts that Kim gave us all?
Which one are you talking about?
The people on it, and the children, and the light and the dark, and well, if you can't find it, that's right. Anyway,
are you referring to the
science of the future? The science of the future based upon God. That one.
Well, where is that, Jim? You got to give us a little bit more so we know what to pull
I don't know. I thought you guys had it in your files.
Okay.
That's all right. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
What you're learning is that all that really exists is absolute 100% pure love and light of divinity. Everything else that is an illusion from the idea, which is permanent knowledge forever, of that true reality. I think John might have it. There it is. So if you look at the very first square in there that is absolute pure light,
yes,
that's divinity. That's the undivided. That is all that is, ever was, or ever will be. Everything that follows is a simulation of that one true idea. It's a simulation in divided light and divided selves. All that we call creation is molded and manifest in exact accordance with our knowledge and our desire to work within it and our limitations. But it does not change or affect God in any way, ever. It's
okay.
It's so clear to me because of my near-death experience at 5. I went right to that light, and I knew the universality of that light, and I knew that it was all that there was, and I knew that my body self was an image projected from the idea of that light. And this is at 5.
Okay.
So this is why the Russells jumped out to me when I saw them. And,
so,
and then I'm sorry, this will become your thinking over time. And you don't need to rush it. You will transform your thinking from your body as self to understanding that you are a universal self, and every other expressing body in creation is an image of the idea of your universal self.
So excellent, well said. And what I want to mention to everybody who's new, so as a new student myself of 3 years in this lifetime, I actually have millions of years of studying these concepts, but in this lifetime, only 3. So when we go through the first section, I ask that you please just tolerate the fact that your brain might not quite get it yet, because as a newer student, it took me time. But the exciting thing that I want to encourage you all is by the end of this lesson, there's going to be some things that click into place for you. So hang tight. So before I hand it over to you, Margaret, I'd like to scroll down a little bit on 258, because there was another really important sentence that came up here in 258. And what it is this. It said, what then is the body? Our civilization is made up of bodies of men. These man bodies, this is on page 258, these man bodies have been created. Scroll up just a little bit there, right there where the star is. These man bodies have been created solely to manifest the idea of their creator. So Margaret, speaking to someone who's new, John went straight to the big stuff, Jim went straight to the big stuff. What would you say to someone who is new, that is just now really hearing about this idea of manifesting idea?
Yes, I think the way I like to think of it is all idea is within God. And as we become closer to God and concept, then we can also link in or create idea. So God is essentially the cathode, right, which is 0. And the creation is the anode. It's the visible half. So there's an invisible and there's a visible. Now the visible is highly essential, because while we're in a body, that's when we express our God selves. Okay, so that's why it's critical that we are in a body. We have the privilege of expressing our God selves. And everything we learn in this lifetime is recorded and saved. And when we refold back into the light, everything is saved. And then when we unfold again in another life, we start where we left off.
You know, when I first got wind of that, Margaret, I was pretty excited, because I was like, I'm going to make the most of this lifetime. So I start the next one way ahead of where I really what thought I was.
Yeah, because as you grow in spirit, you know, you insulate yourself from everything that's unlovely, right? Okay. In other words, you grow exponentially. Just don't do anything crazy or unbalanced, or, you know, don't go out and hurt somebody. You know, it'll set you back.
Okay. So let's think for a minute. I wanted to mention what she talked about, invisible and visible. So this is one of my favorite parts of the Walter Russell work, is when he talks about the acorn. And within the acorn is visible. Okay, it is the sense, we can see it, we can pick it up. I pick it up off the ground when I'm hiking. But within this acorn is the invisible idea of the oak. Would that be a good way to describe it, Margaret?
Definitely.
And so we all have no problem understanding that an oak tree is in fact imbued within this little acorn.
That's right. And see, it's the idea of the oak tree is in the acorn. But okay. You know, the body of the tree, right? The body of the tree is a representation of the idea, but the idea stays within God's realm. The idea is invisible, right? But the tree is manifesting the idea. So I think that's the best way to explain it, really.
Okay. So I'm going to keep us going. I would like us to cover 2 more things before our first break. And so I'm going to mention something, and then I'm going to ask Karen to even comment. If we go over here to the bottom of page 259, where I have it highlighted, and it talks about how it explains this into considerable detail. So for those of you that have the home study course, you'll want to dive into that. But it talks about how God awareness begins to unfold, and we call that period of early beginning the dawn of consciousness. Now, what I chuckled at was, is this now a clear picture to you? If not, it must be, and we urge you to stop right here and meditate long upon these few pages or review past lessons until you are so sure of your full comprehension that you can no longer think of your body, as we're scrolling down, of your body as being you, but instead you will think of yourself, capital S, as the creator of your body, and you will someday know that yourself is within your body. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention because we cannot cover everything on a broadcast for the whole entire lesson. Our goal here is to bring up just certain things. And so, Karen, I wanted to go on down to the yellow highlight and then to the what I have highlighted in green. And this particular paragraph talks all about the space in between our cells, and it talks about we would actually, if we had to squeeze all of the space out, we'd have to use a microscope to find you. And if we'll go down to the green highlighted there, it says, we have thus shown you that your entire body is but a microscopic dot surrounded by the vast reaches of seemingly empty space. At any rate, you cannot see yourself in it, just as you cannot see the real oak tree in its seed. So a comment from you about this, because I know you created a fantastic visual journey for us before we take our first break.
It's funny, this one is not in this current visual, but it will be coming. I think the one that when you and I presented at Tesla Tech, when you look at the universe is a vast bunch of dots when we look out. And we just see, but we don't see all the creations necessarily within it. Your body is 99.9% water at a molecular level. So basically, as water, we're not that even different from the whole universe, where, I mean, even the universe itself is made of plasma and water. And the only difference is between water, liquid, solids, and gases is the density, as we talked about once before. So we are on this continuum. We are one in a field, and even one drop of water has a magnetic field. Your heart has a magnetic field. Your body has a magnetic field. We live in the Earth's magnetic field. And each one of those is like Russian dolls, and we're all part of the whole, and we're all part of the same. And so, but within each one of us, we're just made of dots.
Okay, so I love the way Karen actually begins to think in an integrative way. John and Jim and Margaret are keeping us pure to the Russell way of viewing things and finding a way to be able to combine the two. But what I wanted to say to all of our viewers here is that when you start walking through nature and you see an acorn, please understand that you're seeing a very, very important concept in the Russell science right there from the very beginning. And when you understand that, everything else becomes, to me, I'm stepping out of my facilitator role here and into a student and just a panel member. For me, this was magical. When I understood this going through the home study course, and I never walk by an acorn anymore without understanding that it is a microscopic version of some of the larger secrets of the universe that the Russells are trying to teach us. Is that a fair way to say it, panels?
Yes.
And within that contains its whole. So it's not like it's contained in the whole. And in this whole thing, the universe contains its whole. It may be secret, but in it is the whole.
Yes, you could technically destroy that oak seed, and you've done nothing to harm the idea that is the oak. It will remanifest on some planet in some solar system somewhere as an oak tree. You can't harm idea, but you can destroy body.
Okay, so when we return from this first break, we're going to be moving to the bottom of page 5, moving into page 6. And so I'm keeping us at a quick clip today because there is a lot contained in the later portions of this that I felt was really important for us to land. So we do take a break around every 30 minutes so that you can stand up, get some of that oxygen, get some water. We care about you, and we want you to be ready to be able to absorb what's coming next. So your 3 minutes begins now. We'll see you shortly. right. If you will find your way back to us. 3 minutes goes by quickly. So I wanted to bring up the comment from Rebecca. So Rebecca, hello. So good to see you along with the others. And Rebecca says this: I just received my home study course today and will try to stay going back and rewatching all the videos starting number 6. So, all right, we're sending you a big hug, Rebecca. That is very, very exciting. Rebecca also is a graduate of one of the Russell experiences, and so we're thrilled to hear that there. Now, before we dive in with our panelists, I did want to do a quick student spotlight, and some of you that are listening might find this particular student spotlight really inspiring. So as we pull this up here, there is a student, his name is Brian Scott, and he has done some pretty remarkable work. Part of what's really impressed me is that as this work went into storage, and it was actually in storage for 20 years, there were people like Brian Scott. And if we'll pull this right there, we can see that, but I want to just let you know that what he's done is he actually did for the first few lessons of the home study course, he read the home study course, and that is available on his YouTube channel. And so I have that on the slides there, where you can actually see Brian Scott's banner, but James can pull it up there if you'd like. I'd like them to see what they're looking for. But because I have a quote from Brian. I was just in conversation with Brian this morning, and Brian had this to say about Walter Russell. And so when we bring that up from the slides, that is actually on slide 22. And what he said was this. He said, Walter Russell is one of the most advanced spiritual and scientific writers I have ever encountered. Clearly, he was far ahead of his time. There is no doubt that his writings and his knowledge was touched with the hand of the divine. And so I just simply wanted to honor Brian, and you can see in the next just couple of slides that not only did he do the home study course, but he's also done a number of the other books. And for some of you that like to listen to this and need more than just Sunday night, you would find this particular work inspiring. Brian has he has well over 500,000 viewers. He's up to almost 700,000. And when I talked to him about the Russell work, this is a man who is incredibly excited about what Walter Russell brought to the world. And John, I know with you being former president and Margaret, you being on the board of directors, it inspires me to see people that dedicate so much time to uplifting the Russell work. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, it's good to know that there's more of us out there that are making their contribution to spreading the message. So it feels good to know that somebody's out there trying to do their part.
Yes, Margaret?
Yeah, and I would just add that, it's great that he's got like over 500,000, I think you said.
Yes.
And I would just hope they would all order the home study course and have it in their home.
We're working on that, Margaret.
Because, as the Russells said, every organization, they put an effort to give higher knowledge, but that organization also needs to be re-given. So I would hope that people that benefit from the material, it would be a huge asset for them to have the physical course in their home and in front of them.
I love that. And in fact, Bonnie says, I love what Bonnie says here. She says, I listened to Brian Scott for my bedtime story. I've listened to a number of his videos. And in fact, when I asked him about what motivated him several months ago, but what motivated him to do it, he said, I was doing it out of a genuine love for the work. He said, but I got through the first few units and realized that I couldn't keep going because I needed all the visuals. And so he wasn't able to finish the project like he'd hoped. But to Margaret's comments, since this seems to be a good thing, I wanted to pull up a video clip, if we could, of one of our other previous students. And this was a gentleman named Tim Gillespie who came online, and John was a supporter of his work as well. And Tim recently refolded, is what they call this, because we cannot die. And much to what you just said, Margaret, I thought this clip from Tim and his memorial video, where Ken, who is not able to be with us tonight, but he interviewed Tim. And I thought Tim's point about making sure that he was giving back was very, very powerful. So let's roll that video since Margaret brought it up, and everyone just tune in because Tim was an incredible student that was so supportive of the work. Are we ready?
I started to read the message of the Divine Iliad, And I started to realize that everything he was saying is true. And it all makes tremendous sense. And I was reading a bootleg copy of the book. And so 2 chapters into it, I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to really keep reading this book, but the first thing I have to do is go buy my own copy so that I'm not breaking the law of balance as he describes it. And so after that, I was hooked. I was totally hooked. The descriptions of God, the intimate conversations, the science of lightweight mechanics that he brought through do nothing but speak the truth that this is God, this is God's language, light, and this is God's science. And this is an opportunity to understand and commune with God in a way that was never available to me before. And when I saw it, I realized it, and I decided I would never, ever let it go.
So Margaret, you didn't even know we had that video clip ready, but it really touched me when I was there. I was so grateful that we were building a virtual studio there at the museum. Please know that I actually even have an office there. And when he was our very first interview in that new virtual studio, and had no understanding that we would lose him just a few months later. And when I heard him say that, actually, because if you would, for just a moment, Margaret, and then I'll ask Jim and John to comment, that, you know, after Leo refolded, all the work ended up, and after a few years, ended up going in storage for 20 years. And so many students didn't know quite what to do to continue the message. So can you just comment on that before we get back to lesson 14?
You know, it is true that it was in storage for almost 20 years, and but the material was always made available. There was always a way to order it online. It was shipped out very promptly, and it, you know, it was the message was still going out. Unfortunately, the presentation of all that the Russells accomplished was in storage. So when everything was on display at the big palace at Swannanoa, it was a tremendous display and awe-inspiring. And it was in a backdrop of a big marble palace. So that alone was a draw. When they walked in, then they saw all the sculpture and artwork. Then they met Leo Russell. So it was an excellent vehicle for extending the message. When it went in storage, it definitely stalled the growth of the organization.
Thank you. John, if you would just comment on that, because I know that you also had a passion for renewing that and having people have access more to the work, because I think there were a lot of people who wanted, but they just weren't sure. And in all fairness, when you go back 20 years, we were still the kind of the infancy of early internet days.
Right. Well, that was a dark period for the message, in my opinion. You know, to have the greatest message ever delivered to mankind being packaged up and boxed up and stored in a warehouse for 20 years. But you take Jim Porter and myself and his wife and a few others, we said this cannot stand. Right. And we put into motion a move to get this message back out to the world. And then the home study course that we are promoting today, as president, I made sure that the world got the original, untouched, unedited version of the home study course. So people will get the real thing now instead of who knows how many different versions are on the internet now. So.
All right, so that's what we're after. And Jim, just a final comment, because then I'm going to have us go into lesson 14 here. I just wanted James to show right quick, but so many of this, because this is an act of love, the fact that the work is now available, and that's exciting. That's part of what inspired me. And I want to say a gracious thank you again when we think about the legacy of what we have here. Jim, you know, you were also part of this, of actually helping to moving everything there into that museum, and what an act of love that was. You have a comment?
Yes, it was an act of love, and it was also a beautiful act of awareness on the part of the board at the time that this message did need to come back out again. And
they gave to the homepage, James, just that one picture of the museum. Okay, go ahead, Jim. And so it was an act of love, and that's what's, I think, very
Well,
exciting.
of course. So we convey to them our willingness, along with Matt Presti, who was paramount in making this happen, that we would be willing to give the time and effort to bringing the museum back into life again. And Bill Cranwell, high-ranking member of the board, and the others were in support of that. So it's not a finger-pointing moment. It's a moment where a group of people came together
Yes.
who have equal love for the message and decided to bring the message out of the storage and back to the world, because it doesn't belong to us or any individual.
Yeah.
It is left to posterity to uplift the world. And that's what our point was.
And I really want to second that, because I know the impact it had on me. But Karen, you had studied the work for a while, and then you had a chance to come to an actual program, the Russell Experience. And so can you describe for everybody just that first moment of when you first walked in the museum? And then everybody else, we're going to the bottom of page 260.
Well, it was nice to, when I walked in, it was absolutely lovely. I think John was playing the piano, which was pretty spectacular, and set the background for this amazing sculptures and pictures and science. And the fact that you could actually go and see and witness it and experience it firsthand was absolutely lovely. And the experience I had was with Kimberly, and Kimberly actually set the tone by inviting people not just to see it, but to witness the different science techniques so that we could actually embody it. So I appreciate that, Kimberly.
All right, and so we continue our journey together here on the bottom of page 260. And so I do want to bring up to you that it says in later units, we will diagram the invisible mind universe and the visible motion universe. So everybody, if you would, that's listening in, if you would just let us know you're still there, you're hanging with us here, because we want you to know that as we go into this, it's going to make more and more sense. So I want to scroll down here to the page 261. And it talks about, we further define and explain God's holy law of mating. Okay. And so if we would, John, if you'll read that first paragraph, and then we're going to go ahead and continue down to that second paragraph, if you would.
Yes. We further define and explain God's holy law of mating. All through these lessons, we have accentuated the idea of sex as the basis of creation. We use the term, the divine Trinity, which we wish you to think of in the same terms as the undivided, which I will say is God, mind, the divided, which is matter, which is motion, which is idea made visible, and the united, which is a return to mind and to God.
All right.
You want me to read the...
Please go ahead down to the next paragraph.
All right. You are now prepared to comprehend the higher meaning of sex. The lower meaning of present-day man is that sex is an act of cohabitation for the planting of the seed, for the production of a baby, a bear cub, or any other form of life. That is a timed event. Nature's meaning of sex is the eternally permanent and timeless continuity of father and motherhood. The baby and the bear cub must grow. They must be nourished. Motherhood is timeless, and every interchanging action and reaction of fathers and mothers of creation is as much a part of nature's sex relation as cohabitation for the planting of the seed is a sex relation.
Okay, so a quick comment here from Jim, if you would, and then I'm going to ask Margaret, because we have a lot to go into the next page on page 262. Quick comment, Jim.
Well, they said it to me in the sentence, every action, every interaction of all people and in all stages of life and all expressions is a sexual interchange. And if it's loving, based, and balanced, it creates beauty. And if it is not, it creates disruption. It's that simple.
Okay. Margaret, you want to comment before I continue to page 262?
I think the divine Trinity, the undivided, the divided, and the united, I see of it as the undivided is the zero or the cathode. The divided is male, female. So it's always male, female. Or, it's a polarity and a potential. And then when they unite, they also multiply. So like even idea. So in the visible realm, it's everything is being multiplied. That's why there's such tremendous diversity, but it's the zero, male, female, united and multiplied.
Okay, if you take a hike through nature, you actually see this multiplication principle happen all over. It's really fascinating. That's what I was so excited about the work. Before we continue, because I'm going to keep us on a quick clip here, I do want to go back up to Rita's question. Rita says on page 259, what does the completed body image of the man idea mean? All right.
Is that open to everybody?
Well, Jim, you want to dive in?
Yes, it means reaching God oneness. When you reach oneness and can say, I am the Father creator or one, I am the Mother creator or one, knowingly and manifest that creator within all of us, you have achieved the goal of the man idea.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I would say, the man idea, the idea is with God, right? The idea is in the zero. The manifestation of the idea started really as an amoeba, and as conditions allowed on our planet, that one amoeba diversified. And, man calls it evolution. Leo calls it unfolding. So the man idea unfolds. It takes eons. And, and it was only just recently that we reached the level of the dawn of consciousness. So, it's a billion-year process. So, okay. But the man idea, she always said it was really a consummate idea, the man idea in creation. And when she says man, she means man and woman, of course.
Man and woman. Okay, so I'm going to keep us going. I'm going to have a scroll down to 262 because there's a lot to cover in this one, and it's all going to come together towards the end. And I know this incredible visual journey that Karen has for us at the end. So if we'll go to the top of page 262, and here's scroll up just a little bit, James, before the black circle. Okay, so one more sentence up, please. All right, it says nature is purposeful and quickly reacts to destroy that which violates her purposefulness. The pagan mind believed, therefore, that sex was an evil thing because of its violent abuse by man. Throughout these early centuries of abnormal sex practices, the belief in evil of sex crept into the entire race, so much so that the doctrine of the original sin grew out of it through the Adam and Eve pagan fable. So just I'm going to step out of my facilitator mode, and this has been something that for me, as someone who was beat over the head with this growing up, all we have to do is look at the back of any one of our technologies, the one that's predominant, and we are constantly reminded all the time that women were responsible for the fall of man. So please, that is my personal opinion. And this is something that has really been heavy on my mind because this is part of what really appealed to me about the Russell work. So if we'll scroll down here, and it talks about where you'll see I have the blue on the right and the red on the left. And so, John, if you would please start here where it says history records several such messiahs of virgin birth.
Yes. History records several such messiahs of virgin birth. The very fact that the human race has made sin out of God's one holy law of father and motherhood, with its love aspect of giving and re-giving through rhythmic, balanced interchange, and its one light wave created process of division of the undivided, through the purpose of uniting divided pairs, indicates how primitive the human race still is. Amen. I think this is where we should conclude the lesson, and we'll pick it up next week.
All right. So now for someone who is new to this kind of conversation, if they have any kind of old hangups around this subject or what they've been trained in, I want to mention to them that what they're talking about is how this plays out in nature across the board.
If I may, Kimberly, I'm so
Please.
glad that you did the red and the blue.
I did. Yay,
So
I get points. That was Russellian bingo, you noticed.
Yes. So if people will start associating the terms that we're using here, right? So father is red and the mother is blue, and it's that constant interchange to and from, that rhythmic balanced interchange of to and from. is the balanced sex principle of the Creator. And without that, there's nothing. Nothing.
All right. So you're right. And I'm going to ask us to jump ahead here. I'm going to have James pull up a slide right quick because I want you all to notice that's listening in. Give me a thumbs up if you're still hanging with us because we know these are big. But I want to go back to an image that's actually described in Unit 10 that you've already seen this in previous videos. Okay. So what's so beautiful is that there is a tapestry that is woven with this work. And so, John, this is what you were speaking of, correct?
Yes.
So what
Yes.
happens with resilience, with people who study this work, is that by the time they get through all 12 units, there is this whole picture of how all of these pieces fit together. Is that a fair way to say it, Margaret?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so let us keep going here because I want to go down to the bottom of page 262, and then I'm going to ask Jim and Karen to chime in here. So what it talks about in this particular section is that light waves and sex are one. God created this universe, and remember that they refer to God as the universal one, as the creator. So you use the term that's important to you. He created the idea of father motherhood, and he created material bodies to manifest love through father motherhood. If we'll scroll down to what I've highlighted in green, and it says this: you will see how utterly unnatural it is to believe that God's expression of love in nature can possibly be sin. So let's scroll down right quick. There's a lot that you want to study on your own here. Okay, but I'm keeping us quickly because there's so much important information here. It says you hear thanks, prayers of thanks in every church and home for the food God gives us. Every mouthful of food thus given is produced through the sex uniting process, which creates the wheat, millet, corn, meat, milk, fish, fowl, and the many varieties of fruits. Not one species of animal or vegetable is virgin born. Jim, can you chime in about that, please?
Well, it's just a simple fact, and it is this virgin birth idea is a pagan belief, and it's because of their belief that sin was an evil act, and that sex between two people was an evil act and therefore tainted. And out of an evil act in their minds, something as graceful and beautiful as a Christ-conscious being cannot possibly come. And they were horribly misguided in that, and it's caused war and death around the planet ever since it was adopted. So it just isn't necessary. Any being born of male and female intercourse and brought into body has the potential and the ability to become a Christ-conscious being. They don't need to be created by God and stuck in the womb, although everything is indirectly created by God and manifested in the womb. So we need to let go of these limited, hateful bias. I mean, it's a hateful expression toward womanhood and motherhood itself to think that God would put his plan aside to manifest a Christ-conscious being.
You know, Kim, I have a little bit of a story. I still remember Leo retelling a time when she went to speak to a group of ministers, and one of them was brave enough to ask her about the virgin birth, if she believed in it. And she responded by saying, even God cannot violate his own laws.
Okay. Well, so there's an important question here, Margaret, and I'm going to ask you. So Terry says, so we're not contributing to the balance unless we're having sex?
Balanced sex.
Well, you have to remember, you know, when the Russells say sex, you have to go back to the divine Trinity, okay? The uncreated or the undivided, male, female, okay? So male, female is simply, it's an interchange in everything, in business life, social life, marital life, you know. So when the Leos say sex, they're not saying physical sex per se, you know, they're saying simply interchange. So like an interchange between labor and the corporate top. Okay, that's an interchange. So You know,
Okay.
so in other words, you have to have a balanced interchange between really with everything. So,
Yeah. All right.
and
So I wanted to mention that because that's what one of the things when you first get into this work, because nobody else talks about this, sex supposedly is taboo in so many of the other religions and so many of our other ways that we've been trained, that when we don't understand the scientific approach to sex and how it relates to nature. So Terry, what I would say is that hang tight, we're going somewhere and it's going to make more sense shortly. But Karen has a last comment. Karen, and then John, and then we're taking our next break.
I'm just going to go, we're going to go back to the whole thing we started with, natural law. And when we talk
Yes.
about natural law, we're going to talk about the sun and the earth. The sun is the heat and the earth is the cool. And so we need the sun to nurture the seed that's been given, and the womb is still the earth that actually grows the thing, no different than mother, father, earth. And each one needs to be nurtured, as he talked about with your children. So having sex is, yes, you do have to do it to procreate the rest of the race. You have to do it, but he's saying do it with love and do it with proper balance. Don't do it uneven, as we see in so many ways that it's taught from world cultures to world religions. So that part is the part he's actually inviting us to rethink about that balanced interchange, because anytime there's an unbalanced thing and the seesaw, it's going to go wanky. Somebody's not going to feel the goodness of it, and it's not going to nurture the great love that we should be having. So yes, sex is a thing, but in its right place with a right partner, and nurtured. And again, nurtured the father, son, the sun, the earth. Yeah. So there you go.
All right. We have a lot more to say about that. John, last comment before we go to break.
Yeah, that one line that you put up saying that it was a light wave sexed universe.
Yes.
My Karen thought that meant that we each held flashlights and we pointed it at each other.
You are.
What are we going to do with you?
I don't know. We can keep it humor.
All right. So for everybody else, before we leave, if you would, in the chat box, all that you were listening to us, if you would, let us know how you're feeling right now. I know these are big concepts. So give me one word for how you're feeling. Are you feeling inspired, confused, curious, encouraged, interested in learning more? What are you feeling right now? So if you would, let us know where you're feeling. There's a lot more to go to my panelists here. We have a lot more to go starting in 265 when we return. It is time for our next break, 3 minutes in. Use this time to breathe. Would love to have you all check in and let you know how you're feeling. See you in 3. All right. And while this quote is on the screen, I'd like you all to pay very close attention to the quote. Future generations of unfolding man must make so great a transition in their thinking that it is as though they were transported from the country of their own language into another country. So this was back from Unit 3, and it might be resonating with some of you, as some of this might be sounding like a different language, and that's because in some cases it is. So as someone who was new to the work, don't get hung up on this yet, because what it is going to make a lot more sense as we go through this particular lesson. So if it is okay with the panel, I'm going to jump down here to page 264. And I want us to dive into the spiritual basis of polarity. So polarity is a word that you're all going to want to write down here, okay? The spiritual basis of polarity. So Jim, in the simplest of terms, what is polarity?
It's an equal, I'm sorry, you say Jim?
Jim, yes?
Okay, it's an equal interchange between the two poles of the body, the masculine dominant and feminine dominant within every body. And when one gives itself to the other, lovingly, centered in love, they void their individual natures out and they become one. And that one that they become is divinity. It's
okay.
God.
All right. So let's see where we're going. Margaret, what's the simplest way to describe polarity? We're having a little contest here.
You know, really, the Russells, they dreamed of equal polarity. Right? So in other words, any kind of imbalance is an imbalance in polarities. And if you have an imbalance, there's a residue of tension. So the Russells always said that man should strive to keep every transaction balanced. Never try and have the better end of the deal, saying, oh, you got a bargain, you really... this vendor, you got him down to practically zero and you think you won.
Right.
That's an unbalanced action and it's unfair. So in other words, you want every transaction between purchaser and vendor to be equal so that there's no tension in either party. You don't want to overpay, you don't want to underpay, you just want to be fair.
All right. So I'm going to keep us going because I'm taking us on a path here. So notice where the yellow brackets are. All of the troubles of the world lie in that one cause: breach of the law of polarity, which upsets the balance of every transaction between divided pairs. Okay, divided pairs. And so let's scroll down a little bit. And I want to go to the highlighted sentence that's towards the bottom of this. And it talks about how that all the world is just a repetition of just that one part of it. One part of this. Let us picture the effect of the minister's little section of it by imagining 500 or more seesaws placed in a field. Everybody get that in your imagination. Jim, if you'll show your seesaw. Everyone, in case you haven't seen a seesaw lately, we want to just remind you what it looks like. You probably maybe rode one as a child. A seesaw is an excellent example of polarity or sex division. John, if you would read the next few sentences as we begin to further describe what this issue around the seesaw is.
All right. Will James be scrolling down for me?
That is why we choose. Let's continue there, John. Scroll up a little bit, James. That is why we choose.
All right. That is why we choose this example. It is important that you realize and recognize that similarity. A seesaw divides the one balance of its fulcrum into two extended balances, which must be equally balanced in order to unite and repeat. Jim, hold up your seesaw and point to the fulcrum for everyone. No, the fulcrum. That's it. Fulcrum, that is where God is. That's where the undivided is. All right. And then when that goes into motion, there you have the sex balanced interchange, male, female. Maybe we should put a little red paint on one side and blue on the other. And that's all there is. And that's all there is. But all power, all motion, all idea comes from mind, comes from that fulcrum.
Okay, thank you, John. So let's go, if you could, James, let's go ahead to slide 32, please. And I want to just give some people some images here, because when we did the Russell experience, as a new student who came in and asked John if we could do a class, a 3-day class, I actually had an adult-sized seesaw built because this was how important it was. And I just want to show you some images. So here's what we're talking about in balance. If you'll see the next image, sometimes you can see that it takes more on one side to balance the other. You see the fulcrum there in the middle that John is talking about. Sometimes if there's a balanced situation, as you'll see in the next one, it takes more on one side, but notice where the fulcrum has to move. So there's a lot of effort to be able to keep it balanced. I always joke with people that I feel a little bit like, with guys, don't get mad at me. I feel a little bit like this next image, that every once in a while, one really strong female to balance a lot of other males in the room. But I'm just saying that with much love.
Bullshit. Excuse me.
That's okay, John. I'm sending you love. And sometimes when you think about a seesaw image, even in society, it looks a little bit like this next one, where we're all trying to kind of figure out how things are staying in balance. So I just wanted to have a little fun there as we go into this. And before we continue with this conversation, Brian, love to see you. Let's bring up Brian's comment here. It says, "Hi, everyone. I'm on Unit 7 of the Home Study course, and I love the materials. I look forward to it spreading for the uplifting of the world." Brian, we're right there with you. How exciting is that? How exciting is that? And so as we go to page 265, I wanted to continue. Margaret, can you see the screen? Can you read what's there and circled in the green, please?
Yes, and she was referencing a minister had indicated that 70% of his parish had come to him with marital problems. Now, if you pick out 500 equally balanced pairs of children and youths of various ages and weights and put pairs of equal weight on these 500 seesaws to interchange their balance with each other, they will be in the same condition which nature is in regard to balance interchange. They can continue to manifest the universal Trinity by dividing the undivided and uniting the divided forever and ever in the balanced rhythm of eternal nature.
All right, very, very powerful. So if we could, they go on in the next paragraph and they talk more about some of the examples that I just showed you about how do you balance things. And I want to scroll down to where it's highlighted and below, and it says this. So what Margaret was just saying, the latter example pictures the condition referred to by the minister and his church group, a true picture of all life, whether marital, business, social, economic, or civil. The whole world is divided into a very few pairs which interchange equally and find happiness, and very many pairs which find anguish and misery by their unequal interchange. And so before we continue, let me ask our participants, have you ever felt that in any relationship of your life, whether it was personal, whether it was business, whether it was family, whether it was community, have you ever been in an unbalanced interchange?
Haven't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want us all to acknowledge it there. So what does it feel like? I'll start with Karen, and while we're waiting for the rest of the participants to comment, what does it feel like to be in an unbalanced interchange? Karen?
It is when you're giving your all and the other person is taking whatever they get and there's nothing coming back in return. And so they're surviving like great, and there's nothing for you to eat with at the end of the day.
Okay. John, what does it feel like to be in an unbalanced interchange?
Pardon me. Well,
Briefly.
kind of hurtful, actually.
Yeah.
And it's just an extension of what Karen was saying. You know, you're giving, you're not being re-given in like and in kind. And so after a while, you kind of go, wow, right? And so you kind of give up, get tired of it, and you move on to the next venture.
Okay. Now I would like to hear from more of you as participants. Jim, what does it feel? Feeling being, I want to get to the heart of this. What does it feel like to be in an unbalanced interchange?
Well, it creates tension and residual leftover feelings that are not dealt with. And we all have it going on in our life at all times and at all levels. The secret, the way to avoid these tensions is to give out only love and loving thoughts to your fellow man, even when you're not getting the same back. The simplest thing to do in an unbalanced relationship that you are incapable of finding balance in is to remove yourself from it. If you cannot remove yourself from it, then be loving and supportive to the best of your ability in it, and hope that circumstances will remove you. But these things in life are, this is the learning process. I have always marveled at how easily I can see the imbalances in others and how hard it is to see the imbalances of the guy in the mirror. So we want to contemplate a great deal on that side of it too.
Okay, very, very powerful. So I want to mention some of the comments here. So Lisa mentioned that's what sex was to me, an unbalanced interchange. Totally relate to that in the past, Lisa. Judy says definitely unbalanced. Deb says it feels exhausting. Rebecca says it feels drained, depleted of energy. To me, it's very sad. To me, it was the experience was it begins to rob you of your life force.
Yes.
So whether that is with a family member or whether that is with a community member, whether that is someone you're working with in the work relations, when you don't have that even balanced interchange. But I want to bring us all, and I want to breathe healing into this conversation as we continue. And notice what Karen says. Karen says, I want to know what it feels like to be in a balanced interchange.
Tell her to come visit me and I'll share that with her.
So let's bring that up. So this is very, very powerful. And so I want to give kudos to Ken, my magnetic partner, who will be showing you the video where I reveal how it happened. But I've learned a lot in this past year about what it feels like to be in a balanced interchange. And it is very different. And when you think about this, part of what I feel is so powerful about the Russell work, now that I'm stepping onto my panelist hat here, is that the world is in a deep need and there is a thirst for balanced interchange in our communities, in our schools, in our healthcare system. And part of why I believe that humanity has reached this point of desperation is that we really don't know what that feels like. We don't understand what that feels like. Margaret, does that resonate?
It does. And I have to say, when you're in an unbalanced interchange, you feel used.
Yeah.
So, and I've had that professionally. I've been in that kind of situation where my clients were unappreciative of the level of effort I put in a transaction. I've been a realtor for over 20 years. And you get to the point where you want to fire the client, because you don't, mainly not because of the work, but because it's unappreciated.
Yes.
And so, and then relationship wise, I've been fortunate in that I've always had good relationships. They haven't been stressful relationships. But I can't say I've met the perfect one either. So,
Well,
but you can have very good friendships and relationships, and you have a good interchange.
yes.
But there are other people that are users, and I've learned this now because I've been used, in the past. And so, but I learned from that experience. And Leo always said, you do not have an experience you do not need.
Yeah, I know that, Margaret. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of learning. I don't know, just saying. But here's the exciting part about the Russell work is I focus us all back on 266. So take a look at what's at the top of 266 here, because the way for us to address the imbalance in the world is for us to figure some things out for ourselves. You are forever giving something of yourself to your environment or taking something for yourself from yourself. And then in the yellow brackets, it says the sum total of your happiness and misery is dependent entirely upon your ability to become an equal mate to any other mate. This is not just romantic, that you attempt to unite with for interchange. So John, a quick comment on that. As we're talking to folks that are new here and understanding that this interchange, because this was something very important that you described to me in that first year when I worked with you all, is that this balanced interchange is in all relations of society.
I'll never forget this. Leo gave me a quote, and she said, Johnny, She goes, it's the conversation after the sex that's the most important. So, but what I want to say to people is that it's what you have in common with each other that determines that joyousness and that loving feeling towards each other. You know, the science thing that we've all been taught since children, that opposites attract, is just simply bullshit and has nothing to do with natural law. So look for commonalities in a future mate or in a relationship, whatever it is. And if they don't add up, you just need to move on and get out.
All right, so I'm going to keep us going here, folks, because we've got a lot more to cover. I'm going to go ahead and go past the bottom of the hour just to give you all heads up. If we'll look at page 267, and I'm going to ask the panel to raise their hands when they feel like there's something really important for them to say here. But on page 267 is this. It says all people, as highlighted there, if we'll go and continue, all people and all nature are continually and perpetually trying to divide the undivided one into equal pairs and unite those equal pairs into one. Okay, and so scroll down to where the star is, and it says, and I want to take us back to this is why we do the meditation at the beginning like we do. An illustration of our meaning of equal dividing and equal uniting can be found in one's breathing. That is an action-reaction interchange of nature, and it takes place without mental decision. Such an interchange must be balanced, lest you die. Okay, so let's just pause for a moment there and understand that the beauty of the breath is an example of this. Is that fair, panel?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's scroll on down to page 268. 268. And so please understand, for everyone, that we're only covering some of the highlights. It talks about how polarity in nature is always balanced, okay? And as we advance into the units, we'll be going much more into the scientific explanation of this. But it says, in practicality, there with a yellow highlight circle, all human dealings, one mate or both, and every transaction is cheating. That is what is matter with the world. Human beings have not yet begun to learn how to divide the undivided equally. Therefore, they can never unite them, for balanced unity is impossible with unequal mated pairs.
Kimberly, do you remember last week when we showed that clip from the PM Magazine interview?
Yes.
And you remember Leo saying that the most prominent pollution is human relations pollution. And that's what came to mind when you were reading that paragraph, is that man, you know, it's not that man's not trying, but man is still young. He's still ignorant of God's laws and ways and processes, but eventually he'll come around. I mean, look at Jim Porter, for example. Look how he's turned out. That wonderful godlike human being. See, he finally got there.
That's the goal, right, Jim?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop though.
You know, Kim, I have something to add. You know, how we always try and create equality. I still remember a lady telling me that she created her husband. In other words, he would never take the trash out. He would never do this. He would never do that. So she did it herself. So she ended up doing everything herself. So in other words, she was doing 80%, he was doing 20%, but she kind of created that because she didn't have the patience to wait for him to do it. Oh. So if she asked him to take the garbage out, maybe it would take 2 days. So,
but you know, Kimberly, that reminds me, you know, I'll be 70 in September 25th. And I told my Karen the other day, here I am 69 years old, and I didn't know how I didn't know anything. And I didn't know how to do anything until she came around. So I was tying that into Margaret's story. So I get it, Margaret.
So in other words, like, you know, how some people feel that they've been used. You also have to take ownership of having been used. Because
Right.
in other words, you
That's
still did what you thought was service, right? But you just were not discerning enough that you were actually enabling a lazy person. So, in other words, you have to take ownership if you're over serving, and you have to realize, okay, this is not doing me good, so I'm going to pull back. But
Wow.
a lot of women do not know how to pull back, and they overserve.
Totally busted on that one. So all the participants, can anybody relate to what's being said right now? Because that's part of what this is. And Karen, last comment, and I'm going to take us on to the bottom
No,
of the page.
I was just kind of laughing. But when I go back and I think of natural law, we've got the heat from the sun that cools the earth. But without each other, you won't have the tree. You won't have the oak tree, which is actually what is created from the divided. And from there, you get the united. And then you get to see that the sun gets to look down and go, wow, look at what I did and look at what we did together. So then the expression of the sun is actually expressed, but it was from the earth. And together, they've created something that is really beautiful. But if the sun gets kind of mad and he's a little too hot, it could wither. And if it gets too much rain, it gets this. So giving a little bit too much of sun, giving too much of water, everything needs to be in balance. So that's why there's seasons. So it's kind of me, when you look at natural law, it just balances. It does give you things to look at.
It does. Very, very powerful. So Brian has a comment, and I appreciate your vulnerability, Brian. Brian says, to be honest, as much as I think I want God or the divine, I have to admit it is a struggle for me to like my fellow man and want to have a friendship with them. Am I really ready to meet God? So Brian, as someone who actually wanted to live as a monk on a mountain by myself for a long time, I really appreciate that. I totally, and I think that's genuinely part of the lesson here. Last comment, John, before we continue with bottom of page
I wanted to just
268.
drop Brian a little seed, is that once Brian realizes that he is God, then that little challenge that he has in front of him will be a lot easier.
And I want to jump in here real quick and say, Brian, there's nothing that requires you to like your fellow man. You're only asked to love your fellow man.
And also project his gifts of what he's there to give. He's got a seed within him of something that is meant to be manifest and to be shared.
Okay, so we have 8 minutes. I'm going to give us 8 minutes to finish the next 8 pages, dear ones. So if you would, Miss Rita says this: it can be tricky when living in a system that encourages competition instead of collaboration and cooperation. Rita, the wisdom of what you're saying is profound, and it is very important. I'm taking off my facilitator hat and stepping in as a panelist. It is very important for us all to remember that we are living in an inverted system, an inverted matrix. My expertise is in systems thinking. This is what I do for my paying job for corporate. And what you were talking about, and what I am so excited about the Russell work, is I believe the Russell work can help right some of the inversions that have been accepted as normal in society. So that is part of the devotion of why you see us doing what we do here. And so to keep us going, there's always so much to be said, but for the panel, we have approximately 8 pages and 8 minutes. Hang with me if you would. Important things that we need to land. So on the bottom of page 268 in the purple circle, it says, which is the most important of the following? Whether a man knows how to build a better machine than was ever yet built, or 2, whether a man is a good friend, citizen, and neighbor, or a bad one. So I'm laying that there because this is going to be important for our next lesson, lesson 15. And if we'll scroll to the top of page 269, they often referred back to a comment by Edwin Markham. And what did that quote say, John?
In vain do we build the city if we do not first build the man. And that is what this home study course is designed to do.
Yes.
Is to build the man, and hopefully the result will be an everlasting and wonderful civilization.
So if everyone who's listening to this, either live tonight or in the future, if you would hold that vision with us here, because I love what they said in this next paragraph. Of what use are better techniques in the making of a better engineer, doctor, inventor, mathematician, historian, or industrialist, if in so doing we also build greed, avarice, lust for power to conquer, or desire to take more of the fruits of such techniques for oneself? So very, very powerful stuff here. And so I want to go ahead and scroll down here to 270. Now, please understand that when they go into this next particular paragraph here, it talks about we now exemplify rhythmic balance interchange in nature. Okay. And so highlighted there, and before that highlighted yellow sentence, it says they do not even think of mineral and vegetable life as sex divided males and females. This is where we're going into thinking about sex far beyond what we've been trained to. We have now reached a point where we desire to have you think of all creation, notice creation is capitalized, as divided pairs of males and females, okay? And we scroll down, and while I didn't use red and blue for this section, John, I did use green and orange, so I was staying on the spectrum, okay? Red and orange are as much male as man is. Blue and green are as female as woman is. In other words, this entire, actually, I have it on the wrong side though, don't I, John? Dang it. I tried so hard. Ugh, bam. All right, so I'll get it right. We play a little Brazilian bingo as we go through. In other words, this entire universe consists solely of male and female bodies, which unite to live and to create life, and divided to die and be reborn again. Now, I want to go down to the highlighted part in the bottom, and I'm the highlighted sentence. And this is important for us all because as we see gender reveals in society, I want to make this note. Science deeply errs by using symbols like these, plus and minus, to symbolize equally. So, John, if you don't go that one yet, James, I don't want to blow people's mind. We're going to kind of gently, lovingly skip over 271 in our last bit of time here. Why, John, and then I'm going to ask Margaret, why is it important to understand that when we see these symbols that we've been trained to see as positive and negative when it comes to the masculine and feminine, why is that deeply erred in science?
Yeah, Leo always...
Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay. Leo always tells of the story when she corrected Walter's thinking, and he said, "Darling, do you think I'm negative?" And he said, "You certainly are not." So in other words, in the universal one, the female is represented as a negative sign. And so that correction was made really by Leo, and Dr. Russell indicated she was right. So in other words, they're both a positive charge, but they are conditioned differently. So one is male, one is female. I would say one might be anode and one is cathode. It's a motion between the two, and one becomes the other. So in other words, it is a constant interchange, but it's two pluses interchanging perpetually.
Okay. So I want to bring something up to everyone who's listening here. We live in a matrix that is inverted. We have been taught that blue is for boys and red is for girls. According to the science that's been referred to here in the Walter Russell work, that is backwards. Very important for us to remember that. So the female, if you will see there on the right, is with those colors of blue, and the red is the masculine on the left. And notice how in this particular illustration that's in Unit 10, we'll get into that much later, it is both positive, as we referred to what Margaret just said. Anyone have a brief 60-second comment before I keep us going?
Well, what I will say, Kimberly, is that man, even though he has it backwards, the principle of the sex interchange is still intact. It's just that they need to get the colors right, and they need to understand what's happening there. And there is no negative.
There is no negative. And the reason I'm bringing this up, John, is because when people first start learning the Russell work, it is contrary to the way they've been taught. And that is because we live in a matrix that has been inverted in many ways. And so once we understand this work and we go through the home study course, what I found is that then I'm able to reconcile what I then learned in the world, and I bring it to a point of a greater understanding so that I can learn even more about the secrets of the universe. You see where I'm going?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this up, because I think it's really important when you work with people like Jim and John and Margaret who have lived this for their entire life. They are blessed to live this for 50 years. The rest of us, okay, did not. And so we have a whole lot more to unwind than these three, which is why I pick on them lovingly at times to say we've got to keep bringing it back to how other people will see it, because they see the world. They literally have a very, very different lens to see the world than all the rest of us. It's a powerful lens, and you will see that this is very powerful because I see the light in so many people that have studied this work. Karen, quick comment before I take us to 274, please.
No comment.
Okay, thank you. And so 274, I would like to go to where the blue highlight is, as I'm trying to get us to one really important point before we finish up. There's a lot more in this particular lesson, but let's go on down here to 274. Continue down to the blue highlight. And so in there it said, if man would but learn nature's way of balancing her transactions, we could have a perfect civilization tomorrow. But as long as man divides unequally and then takes the larger half instead of giving equally, he will never learn the long lesson, which is the purpose of creation. And so as we scroll down here, part of the power of why we're doing this every Sunday night is it talks about how the light that they have within them, referring to the men and women, they can give to other men in the measure of their power to give, while the illumined ones can give in their greater measure. God perpetually talks with every creature in the measure of its ability to comprehend him. Instinct is a small measure, but inspiration is a large measure. Okay. And so, John, since due to time here, we've got a lot of talk about light waves here. I want us to skip down to page 277. And James, I'm going to ask you, because it's a better picture on slide 27, please, to go to this. This is on page 277. And I want everyone to understand what this visual is, because it is a foundation to the Russell work. And so James is going to bring up the slide because the pictures turned out better than the scan did. And so we have 4 slides here. We have this, right there on that one. And John, if you will explain what is collectively on there. And then I have 3 slides that divide this into the 3 different images there. So wrap this up, please, with this lesson.
There you go. The undivided, God, mind. The divided, male, female.
Next slide, James.
And then the united is the seemingly divided becoming one again. And that sequence can happen once in a billion years, or it can happen 6 trillion times in a second. Just think of an oscillation of those rings going in and out, in and out. Divided, undivided, united. Divided, ununited, united. And that's all that happens in the universe. That's it. That's the natural sequence of everything that is in the universe without exception.
Okay. All right, Jim, you want to comment? And then I'll ask Margaret as we wrap up here.
Well, my comment, let me try and be very brief, and I will try.
Thank you.
If you look at a corpuscular unit of light, which Dr. Russell talks about in the Universal One and the Secret of Light, that comes in and out of existence 364,400 times a second. That's a miniature sun coming in and out of existence, going through that total wave cycle, 340,000 at the speed of light. You look at our sun, it goes through the same exact cycle in a period of hundreds of billions of years. The principle is the same. This is the 9-octave wave interchange that you're looking at. And every body goes through that 9-octave wave interchange, no matter how brief that interchange might be or how long it is.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being brief. And Margaret, on James, if you'll go back where we see all 3 on the same page. Margaret, I wanted to slow us down for a moment, because the very last thing I'm going to do is have us go to page 279 before we turn to Karen's visual journey. What is the simplest thing that you want to say to a new student about the importance of understanding what is on the screen right now?
Okay, I want to go back to the analogy of the oak tree. So in the second image, the divided, the seed or the idea is actually in the first slide, the undivided. And then when the seed is in the soil, it is divided. So you've got, as Karen indicated, you've got the warmth of the sun, you've got the coolness of the earth, and then there's 4 pulses. So the embryo is the plane that you see on the second slide. That's the inert gas or the seed. Number 1 is the seed has burst open. Number 2 is a sapling. Number 3 is a mature tree. Number 4 is a tremendous, huge oak tree.
Ah.
And so every cycle has 4 pulses to it.
Go to slide 30, if you would, James, forward to exactly what Margaret said, because that particular thing that she is talking about is on page 278. So what you just talked about here, Margaret, if you would, he put it in the terms of a human, but what you just described to us is what happened with an oak tree, which would be a lovely visual for next week, Karen.
I got it.
Right. And so in the case of the United Man Woman, so they're taking the embryo of a female, the embryo of a male, and then they each go through 4 pulses. So the embryo is the seed, baby, child, youth, and then maturity and united. So they're taking it one pole to the other pole, uniting. So in the case of the oak tree, you can say it differently too. So the sun is 1/2, that's the male, and then the earth is the female. So the 4 pulses, they still go through the 4 stages, but it's the interchange between the sun and the earth or water that creates the magnificent tree.
You know, it also reminds me of the 4 seasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said here, folks, and I know we're running over, so I want to be very mindful. I want you to think about a pendulum going from one side to the other, because that's what's happening in life. And so it's very, very important on page 278. James, if we could show 279, last thing that I want to bring up before we go to Karen's visual journey. And part of why I pushed us tonight is because I know what's coming ahead in the next lesson. So if we'll scroll down, please, James, to the green circle. And it says this. It says, scroll down, the sex interchange, which begins life, is continuous. It never ceases. That is what growth is. That is what motherhood, fatherhood is. That is what love is. The entirety of all the universe is a continuing expression of the love principle, which God is. And scroll down to the last highlighted line, James. What it says is every creating thing in this universe is self-created. And that self, all caps, within each creating thing is God. So a gracious thank you to the panel. We know there are many questions. Before we go into the visual journey, and if you need to take a break now, you are certainly welcome to, but here's what I'd like to remind everyone who is listening, either tonight or in the future, is this is not new knowledge to you. You know this already. You are awakening to a remembering of what's being discussed. So at any moment that you feel an overwhelm or an uncertainty, please relax into that. Understand that what we're doing is we're putting in like puzzle pieces to a puzzle about all of these things are going to make great sense as we get through the course. And I will ask our panelists to have comments when we return. But for right now, you are in for a delightful treat. Take a look and enjoy Karen's visual journey as you begin to see what we discussed tonight come to life. Enjoy. Wow. Now we recognize that is a lot. Do remember that all of these visual journeys that Karen so lovingly gifts to us are on the website, are on the YouTube channel, and there'll even be a playlist with all of these. And we know that there is a lot that is intertwined in that. When you rewatch these in the future, you can hit pause, you can stop the video, and you can meditate on anything that needs to be said. So as we are wrapping up here tonight, because I'm very mindful of where we are, John, you had a thought about the video. You're on mute.
I am.
Oh, there you go.
I thought it was wonderful. It was beautiful, and it was to the subject at hand, and that was to me the most amazing part. So thank you, Karen. Well done, honey.
That was actually the one before. So this one I'm glad I haven't done yet. And the reason is Margaret made a few comments that I hadn't pieced together. And so this next one will be kind of fun for me to do because because I totally get that. And so thank you, everybody. So it's almost like I'm a week behind in a way. Sometimes I'm a week ahead, but thank you. Yeah.
I love it was such a nice summary of the whole lesson. I was going to say that, the Russells were very brave in the way they phrased. They indicated that Adam and Eve is a pagan fable. That's daring to say that because you can estrange a lot of religious people. And then also in the earlier lesson you discussed last week, when Leo indicated in the home study course that Christ came to save us from the belief in sin. So he didn't come to save us from our sins. He came to save us from the belief in sin. And so really, when you really embrace that and step out of the pagan mythology that we've been taught, I was raised Catholic, that it's a renewing of the mind. When you realize that you're accountable for your actions, for your sins, it is recorded in your soul seed. When you're accountable, you can create your own life. You can create a very balanced life. And you do learn in the living of life, which is why Leo says it's a drama. But you really want to embrace the drama and create a nice balanced life, in every department. So that's really the renewing of the mind. If we could step outside of the pagan beliefs, it's so ingrained. And as she indicated in the home study course, clearly 2/3 of the world still believes in these pagan beliefs.
Well, so it's important for us to understand part of what the power of this work ties into what Lisa Treater said. She said, I never had a balanced mother and father to teach me. Life was very chaotic. And prior to that, Lisa also commented saying that I wish I'd learned all of this much earlier in life. And that is the sentiment that I had as well. And so for everyone who's going through here, anytime that you step into something that makes you uncomfortable and you're not sure what to do with it, we say go back to Unit 1 and meditation, and you have a conversation with yourself and the divine, however it is that you define it, because this is your journey. It is a home study course because it is your journey. And so final thought on that your journey aspect, Jim, before I share with everyone just a few upcoming events.
Well, it is an individual journey. We've said it many times, and that communion with Creator on, I would suggest, a daily basis is important in you establishing that communion that is necessary for you to become aware of that divine source that centers you. It's practice. It's like learning to play the piano. The more you practice, the better you get at it.
And so now we all have a visual when you're out there walking, and the next time you see an acorn, you've just tapped into one of the most important lessons. And the next time you're by a park or you see a seesaw or perhaps go build one for yourself, then there you are. When I was doing the Russell experiences at the museum, the wisdom I kept being given is creation is child's play. And it goes back to that comment at the very beginning, is if you can read and count to 9, then you can master the secrets of the universe. Since we are late on time, I want to be respectful. It's just a couple of things to share with you on the event. So last time we mentioned that there is now a live YouTube video on, and we'll place it in the chat box as well. But I want to encourage you, for anyone who has faced addiction or have family members who have faced addiction, Ken did a remarkable job in July talking about how balance is the antidote to addictionism. And so just a reminder of just how powerful he has spent a lifetime of integrating the Russell work with his work on the steps as someone who has been in recovery for 33 years himself. Very powerful personal story he shared. There is an upcoming event in the end of September, as you'll see there next on the screen, September 28th and 29th. I will be helping to MC that event. It is in Waynesboro, Virginia, for anyone who would like to come there. Another robust opportunity to simply continue the conversation. And so to remind you of where we will be next week. Okay, so we encourage you to keep up the pace if you are able to. So next week, September 15th, lesson 15. And this is all based on the need of character, and that will be a very robust conversation. And so if you would have a chance to read up ahead of time, come prepared with your questions. That's one of our favorite things to do, continuing the legacy of Walter and Leo. And I wanted to say a gracious thank you to Margaret for joining us once again. Margaret, we have offered her an extended invitation that whenever her energy and ability is aligning, that she can actually be with us there. So if we'll go back to the panel, a gracious thank you, Margaret, for offering your wisdom and your insight. Any final words as you say goodbye to everyone here tonight?
The one lady that said she wished she'd had it earlier, she should be grateful that she has it now. You know, life is a process. Sometimes I wish I'd had different parents, but it's like I keep going back to what Leo said. You know, it's not the experience itself; it's what you learned from it that's educative. You know, so I always be grateful for where you are. The fact that you're increasing in knowledge and awareness—that's the journey, and be grateful for it.
If I had to sum up the home study course, I would sum it up in 4 words: turn your light on. Very, very powerful. It's an incredible tool. Right now, the home study course is on sale. It is on sale for only $200. So there is a reduction. And for those of you that need a monthly payment, please be sure to check that out. We have the link below. And what we're doing is just simply supporting this and supporting the message. And here, as we end here tonight, sending you all out with much love, this is exciting, because you and all of us right now are right here straddling between the past and the future. And right here in the present, we have an opportunity to change the course of human history, and inviting us all into a more balanced and more loving world. And I don't know how better way we can say that, because I, just like Karen said earlier in one of our participants, I can't wait to see what living in a balanced interchange world is like. Much love, everyone. We'll see you next Sunday.